Hello, and welcome back to another stool test, split test extravaganza. This is turning into a very weird YouTube channel, and I am here for it, baby. I'm loving these split sample analyses. I think this is really important so that we know what tests are going to give us usable, reliable information. Now, keep in mind, you can measure the same thing wrong twice. So consistency does not necessarily mean accuracy. But it does give me personally a great deal more confidence when a test shows the ability to give very similar results 2 times in a row. So that being said, if the title of this video didn't give it away, we're going to be talking about the Biome FX this time, guys. So here's how dedicated I am. I collected my poop for you on Halloween and then the day after Halloween. So that was my Halloween. Don't mind doing it. Love it. I'll poop for you all day if I have to. But with this one, I did this one for 2 reasons. A, because as I said, I think that it's important that a test will give reproducible results if tested from the same sample. So I think this is important. I think that it gives us at least some information about what is clinically usable and what is really reliable and what might not be. Also, though, I'm doing another video that you guys will see on this channel sometime probably in January of 2023. Long story short, I'm doing pre and post testing, very similar to the ombre experiments that I've been doing, where I do like 3 or 4 ombre kits. I take the average of the 3 for all of the microbial markers, and then I do a prebiotic, and then I do another sample of 3, and I take the average of all the microbial markers. I'm doing something very similar to that. But this time I needed to get a measurement of diversity and richness because that's what I'm going for this time. I'm not trying to feed or reduce a specific bacteria this time around. I'm actually trying to increase diversity and richness. So stay tuned for that. I'll give you just a hint. I am eating something every single day for 2 to 3 months. It is not a supplement. It is a food-based intervention, but I'm eating one thing every single day for about 2 months. And I'm going to be doing, well, I already did the pre-testing. That's what this is. And then I'm going to be doing post-testing sometime around the new year. And then sometime hopefully in January or early February, I'm going to be able to make a video about this experiment and tell you if it really boosted my diversity and my richness. So I'm pretty pumped about this because as a lot of you guys know, I have had a truckload of antibiotics in my lifetime. No joke, I was the ear infection, ear surgery kid. Then I got Lyme disease, a pretty bad case when I was 14. Then I turned into the sinusitis young adult. And basically between the age of 0 and 25, I think I had more antibiotics than most people have in a lifetime. So I knew going into this that A, this is what I was born to do, was this specific experiment to demonstrate if I could increase the diversity and the richness of my microbiome. Because I think if I could do it with mine, it gives you a heck of a lot of hope that you could do the same with yours. But anyway, without further ado, without rambling on, because honestly, the first time I tried to record this video, it was an hour long. Let's get right into the stool test, and I'll show you a little bit about what we're working with. So I'm going to toggle back and forth a lot in this video to the point where it might be a little bit dizzying. I'm going to tell you now, I'm always going to start with the Monday sample. Then we're going to look at the 2 Tuesday samples. So that's the order we're going in every single time. I'm hoping that the 2 Tuesday samples are fairly consistent between the 2 because as in previous works I mentioned this method, they were taken from the same person, same day, same turd. So I took one stool sample, I stirred it up to try to homogenize the best I could to my ability, and I sent it in that way after sampling from that somewhat homogenized poop. So I'm hoping that the 2 Tuesday samples are fairly similar between the 2. And if the Monday one has a little bit of variability, I think that's kind of to be expected because they were different days, different samples. But anyway, getting into this, I'm going to go a little bit quickly. You could always slow down the video and you can always go back and look at stuff later on. I will show you everything on screen, so if the super nerds want to slow down and pause the video, you can do that, but I'm going to try to give more of a high-end overview this time, because again, the first time I did this, it was an hour. So Let's look first. I'm going to choose to not talk about the gut microbiome index in this video, just because that's a number that they get from 3 other numbers. So if we talk about the gut microbiome index, alpha and beta diversity, and the resistome, we basically talk about the same information twice. So we don't need to do that. So you can look at the index if you want. I'm not going to for this video. But let's start off by looking at alpha diversity. Then we're going to look at beta diversity. Then we're going to look at the resistome occurrence. So this is my Monday sample. My alpha diversity is basically 4. Then the first Tuesday sample, I'm at 2. And the second Tuesday sample, I'm at 5.28. So I feel like clinically, if I saw those, I would think that they need some work, certainly, because we want to get that at least into the yellow, if not the green zone for something like diversity. The numbers are quite different. So the number of species I had per sample was probably quite a bit different, because that's basically what alpha diversity is measuring. Again, Monday's kind of right in the middle. The first Tuesday sample is iffy at best, and then the second Tuesday sample is quite a bit better. So the 2 Tuesday samples were quite a bit different for the alpha diversity specifically. Now, beta diversity, starting again, let's start with Monday. The beta diversity numbers are pretty consistent within themselves. So 8.44, 6.88, and 6.79. Now, again, I started with Monday. So Monday was the one that was 8 something, but the 2 on Tuesday, that was the difference between 6.88 and 6.79. So those are pretty darn consistent between the 2 Tuesday samples for beta diversity. Alpha, I've got a little bit more of a beef with, because alpha goes from 2.03 to 5.28. So that's a little bit less consistent. But again, I kind of figured, like, for the purpose of what I'm doing for a research project, I figured I would have to do 3 and then take the average of the 3 anyway. So that's actually not terribly surprising. It's a little bit clinically disappointing, but I think that it would give you a rough ballpark of like, yeah, you could use some work on the alpha diversity, like the number of species seen, but the species that we're seeing are pretty standard for like a run-of-the-mill American microbiome. I think that's what we can take away from this. The richness number, again, starting with Monday, went from 7.2 to 7.52 to 7.36. So those are all pretty similar to each other. And then starting with Monday again, looking at the pathogen control index, we go from 8.77 on Monday to 8.77 again on Tuesday and 9.12 on the other Tuesday sample. So again, pretty consistent on that front. So far, the one that had the most variation out of this page was alpha diversity. Let's scroll down a little bit here. Hold on. Okay. So let's just look at the Keystone species. Just at a glance, let's just look at it this way. Ruminococcus brahmi is high, Bifidoadelentensis is high, and all the other ones that they list on here are low. So let's just look at it that way. So again, high, bunch of lows, high, bunch of lows, exactly the same, exactly the same. So the stuff that's out of range is consistently out of range on the Keystone species side. The functions, we're going to talk about that more a little bit down the road, but you can see the functional markers are all over the place. So we've got butyrate production, acetate production, B1, and biosynthesis production, all vitamin biosynthesis, all of those are high on the Monday sample. Then we have a lot of stuff high and 1 low on the Tuesday sample, and then nothing on the other Tuesday sample. So that's a little bit concerning. We're going to talk about it. Again, we're going to give you the clinical takeaway at the end of this. And then don't think of this last section here as dysbiosis. I don't think it's that simple. Rather, just these are the ratios between some of the big phylum and some of the big families. So on the first one, Firmicutes bacteroidetes ratio is high. Prevotella actinobacteria, Proteobacteria actinobacteria is low. And Prevotella bacteroides ratio is high. So we go high, low, high on the, hold on. What are we doing? Where? There we go. It wasn't scrolling. So, okay, so high, low, high. One of them is now normal. So it goes normal, low, high, and normal, low, high. So again, the 2 Tuesday ones agreed with each other on that in that case, but the Monday sample said my Firmicutes bacteroidetes ratio was a bit high. So overall, D's. I'm going to skip this page because we already basically talked about it. I don't really use these ratios a ton clinically, personally, so I'm going to skip over them for now. Let's look at the pathogen control section. Hold on. Oh no, one more page. Okay, let's see that. Well, let me line them up perfectly so I can toggle and it'll make some sense. All right, so going back to the Monday sample, so they detected 3 bad boogeymen, but they were all within normal limits. They were well within the normal range, so none of them were flagged as high. And they even say right here that having a little bit of a pathogen is normal and characteristic of a healthy, diverse microbiome. I will make a note that I don't think that includes Giardia. But, C. diff, E. coli, Bilophila, and Bacteroides fragilis, these are all normal parts of the microbiome. They're not pathogens. You could more so call them pathobionts, where if they become overgrown, they can become problematic. But if they're in low normal physiological ranges, they are nothing to be afraid of, and they're probably educating your immune system. So we've got these guys found here. So C. diff, my sample over here is on the right-hand column. So C. diff goes from 0.09 to 0.11 to 0.05, basically if we're rounding up slightly. So that's fine. That's fairly consistent, I think. E. coli goes from 0.06 to not detected to 0.019. So pretty decent. Again, not detected on the one, but it is it's low on the other Tuesday sample. And again, like it's still well within the normal range. It's not anything to be concerned about. And E. coli is a resident of the microbiome, so having a little bit isn't concerning. Having a little bit of some things, I think, is very concerning. But E. coli, not so much. Like it is a normal part of the microbiome, so I'm not really going to lose any sleep over that. Bilophila wadsworthia, we go, again, starting with Monday, we go from 0.05 to 0.05, basically, to 0.03. So again, fairly similar between the three. And then last but not least, on Monday, Bacteroides fragilis was 0.02. Then it goes to 0.04 and 0.04 for the 2 Tuesday samples. So again, fairly consistent. Again, and the clinical action is going to be the same regardless. You're not going to treat any of these because none of them are elevated beyond a range that we would expect. So we would leave them alone and we would just go, oh, okay, they're there. Big whoop. This is the page where they tell you all the stuff that they did test for. All right, now some bacteria markers over here. Hold on, let me line it up. So much of this video is just you watching me scroll. All right, so let's start with Monday. So we're going to go Monday, Tuesday, Tuesday for all of these. So Akkermansia mucidophilia, our poster child of microbiome talk in recent years. We go from 1.558 on Monday to 1.467 and 1.254 as a percent abundance on the 2 Tuesday samples. So again, like pretty decent. All of those numbers are good. They're right about in the middle of the normal range. Like I wouldn't take any clinical action on those more than likely, so I would leave them be. Then we get into these 2 bifido numbers. So we could see that one is flagged as low and the other one's flagged as high. Bifido longum, we go from 0.098 to 0.033 to 0.02 on the 2 Tuesday samples. So again, consistently low, I can say that much. Bifido analentensis, I was surprised to see high, but we go from 7.654% of my microbiome on Monday, which is bonkers. I had no idea. And then the 2 Tuesday samples for B. analentensis, we go 4.188 and 4.101. So remarkably consistent between the 2 samples on Tuesday. Monday was even higher, but again, like that was a different day and a different poop, so I'm not terribly surprised. I threw the 3rd one in just because of that other video I'm doing, not because it's part of the split sample. But it's fun to talk about anyway. Then let's go down to some of the Firmicutes members. So we're going to let's just start with the overall pattern first at a glance. So we go from normal, high, I'm going to say 0, but I know that not detected does not mean 0. It either means it's below the detection threshold or it's 0. I realize that. I've talked about it in other videos, but not a recent one. So I'm gonna say, to kind of crudely go through this, normal high 0 0, normal 0. Bear with me. So we go there. So normal high 0 0, normal high 0 0, normal high 0 0, normal. All the same. Then the latter part, not detected on any of them, not detected on any of them. And then the last one shows up at a really teeny tiny minuscule amount on the last sample. Okay. If you want to look at the actual numbers, Faecalibacterium praesidentii goes 2.02, let's say, to 1.78 to 1.76. So pretty darn consistent between the three. Ruminococcus brahmi goes from 2.39 on Monday to 1.73 and 1.47 on the 2 Tuesday samples. So again, fairly consistent. The other one that's detected here is Eubacterium rectale, and we go from 1.23 on Monday to 1.03 and 0.78 on the 2 Tuesday samples. So a little bit of variation. Again, the end result is the same. They're not out of range, so you wouldn't treat them anyway. And I don't really know if I would worry about a cellulose degrader being a little bit elevated. Like, I don't think ruminococcus are typically harmful, so I'm not going to treat that even. But you'll notice there's quite a few not detected on the Porphyromycetes phylum assessment, so that's a little sad. Again, I've had a ton of antibiotics, so I'm not saying I'm surprised. But I could be sad. Let's see. All right, then moving on here. So they give us short-chain fatty acid producers. And again, they're looking at genes and pathways identified for short-chain fatty acid production. In this section, we are measuring the abundance of certain bacteria that are known to produce short-chain fatty acids. So we're going to look at the numbers of bacteria first, then we're going to get into the functional markers second, is what they're saying there. So hold on. All right, so if we look, acetate producers, I go from 15 on Monday to 10 and basically 10 on the 2 Tuesday samples. Butyrate producers on Monday was 4.77% of my microbiome. Then we go to 4.4 and 4.4 for the 2 Tuesday samples, so really spot on. On Monday, my D-lactic acid producers are 3.41, and then on Tuesday, they are 3.57 and 4.07, respectively. My L-lactate producers on Monday go from 11.53 on Monday to 5.41 and 5.52 on the 2 Tuesday samples. And then last but not least, propionate goes from 7.88 on Monday to 9.57 and 9.02 on the 2 Tuesday samples. So again, like, there's a little bit of variation from Monday to Tuesday, certainly, but the 2 Tuesday samples are pretty darn consistent between themselves. So I'm pretty happy with that. There's not a ton of variation. Certainly when we're looking at it as a percentage of the total microbiome, I think that that's pretty consistent. Now we get into the functional analysis, and I'm going to actually use, I'll show you the comparison in a second, but let me use this first Tuesday sample and just point something out. When they counted up the propionate producers and the butyrate producers, they give you the percentile of, like, kind of where you plot with the average person. So let's look at butyrate first. So I'm at about 53rd percentile. So I'm smack dab in the middle according to this particular sample. The propionate producers, I'm at the 41st percentile, and acetate 59th percentile. So I'm right about in that middle part of the bell curve on all three of these short chain fatty acid producers from a number standpoint, from like a, hey, how many bacteria do you have standpoint. Propionate I want to highlight here. So propionate, it says I'm in the 41st percentile for the number of propionate producers I have. However, when we get down into the functional analysis, for some unknown reason, it says not detected in my sample, which I do think is problematic. Let's scroll a little further. Hold on. Now let's compare side by side. All right, so butyrate production, I go, and I know like there's numbers here, but I'm going to actually just focus on the percentiles because I think that's easier to digest for most people. So butyrate, I go from 98th percentile to 99th percentile to 88th percentile. The numbers themselves are pretty different, but again, it looks like I'm really good at producing butyrate from at least these three tests. So at least that's fairly consistent. Propionate, on the other hand, we go from 44th percentile to 0th percentile to the 13th percentile. So that one is all over the place. Like, do you work on it? Do you not? I don't know. I would lean towards no, simply because it says propionate production here, but then they tell you that propionate producers, I'm doing A-OK. And if you come up here, oh no, they didn't label any of them. They labeled acetate producers. I'm not too worried about it, probably between those couple of data points, but I do find it very odd and very suspicious that I apparently have the bacteria capable of producing propionate, but they didn't detect any of the genes for the pathways in my gut. Like, I'm not really sure how that works out. From what I have gathered, it's because each individual test had a different number of reads associated with it. So like the amount of genetic material that they were working on to do this test was different from sample to sample. But I think that this is worth noting just as a side note on stool testing. I've kind of come to the conclusion that I think that reporting microbiome data as a percent of the total microbiome probably makes a lot more sense and gives us a lot more consistency than if we report raw numbers like this, like the absolute numbers. So again, you could see here, the absolute number for, number of genes or number of reads associated with butyrate production in my samples were 1474, 1967, and 1034. So you get a lot of variability when you look at just the raw number. But if we could talk about things as a percent of the total microbiome, you effectively have a way to normalize and kind of calibrate the information and make it more easily digestible for the average person to talk about. So the rest of this report was talked about in the context of percent of the total microbiome. This part is, they're looking at the raw number of reads or genes here. So I think it's a little bit apples and oranges, but I wonder if they reported this a different way as like a percent of the total microbiome, I wonder if that would make more sense. I don't know if that's even a thing they can do. But I'll skim a little bit here now because I want to let you guys see this. But basically the same issue came up with a lot of the different functional markers. So again, Monday, Tuesday, and Tuesday. Now let's scroll a little bit. I'm not going to comment on the rest because I think that's how I made the first video an hour long. And why I'm doing the re-record. So, all right, Monday, Tuesday, Tuesday. Poly means that's basically the same. All right, let's look at these three. And okay, so Monday, Tuesday, Tuesday. Again, all of them are within the green, so clinical action is the same, which I'm happy with, but it does vary a little bit here and there. This is the other one that I wanted to take issue with and pause on. So again, Monday, Tuesday, Tuesday. You'll notice that on the number below for GABA, it's not detected, not detected, not detected. So you would be tempted to think, ooh, like my microbiome isn't making any GABA for me. And you might even be tempted to say that would lead me to being more anxious. I can share with you, I don't have anxiety per se. Amy and I have talked about this a little bit on the podcast. Amy skews a little bit more anxious than I do. If anything, if I'm like in a funk, I'm going to skew a little bit more depressed. Not to say that they're mutually exclusive and that you would have one versus the other, but just as a tendency, I don't tend towards being an anxious person. But interestingly, so again, not detected in my sample for GABA production. Then we scroll back up here and they flagged a GABA producer as being off the charts high. And remember, it was 4 point something on the other two tests. So I think I'm at the point with this where I'm really, really pleased with the microbial markers and like how consistent they are from one sample to the other. I probably won't use the functional part of this test quite yet. I think it's neat. It would be cool if they could refine the technique and make it maybe a little bit more usable, but I don't know if we're quite there. But honestly, this is the price of innovation though. There's not very many tests that are trying to do something like this. And it might just be that we need to learn a bit more about the microbiome and about the way, the technique that they're doing it. Like, it just might be such a new technology that it's not going to be great right off the bat. So, it is what it is, but I think I probably won't use this part of the report very much. Here's another page for those of you who might want to see. So histamine and indole, Monday, this is Tuesday, and this is Tuesday. So again, quite a bit of variation. We go from green to on the cusp of green to pretty firmly in the middle. That last one would make you think that I have a histamine issue, which I assure you I don't. Estrobolome, such a fun word, by the way, estrobolome. All right, Monday, Tuesday, Tuesday. So again, a lot of variability between the two Tuesday samples on that one. Vitamins, I mean, it's more of the same, guys. So I'm gonna actually kind of jump forward to the next section of the test because it's really the same kind of stuff popping up. And these next two sections are pretty similar as well. So I'm going to just look at this one and then I'll briefly show you the other one, but I don't want to make this video god awful long like the first time I tried to record it. All right, let's see. Let me zoom in a little bit. Let's see. Wait a minute. Why did that alignment go all askew? Well, isn't this unfortunate? All right, hang tight. Hold on. As she bores her audience with scrolling. The thrill and the excitement of scrolling. I think if I do this, though, it'll line up better. And then, yes. And then we should be able to toggle back and forth. Hold on. I know it's boring. Somebody's going to complain in the comments. I know it. All right. So this is the last little bit I wanted to show you. So this is the phylum level data. Phyla are big, broad categories with many different bacteria in them. For simplicity, I'm just going to talk about it by colors. But you can see here that the pink is Firmicutes, light blue is Bacteroidetes, dark blue is Actinobacteria. That's basically Bifido, more or less. Bifido and like one other friend. Red is Vermicetobiota, which is Akkermansia, and then black is the other category. So starting on Monday, and then we'll do the two Tuesday samples. So on Monday, pink is 56% and blue is 31.82%. We get a little bit of shifting on the next day, but overall pretty similar. But here's where the split sampling comes in. So again, I'm going to show you the two Tuesday samples. So pink goes from 47.3 to 48.9. Pretty darn close. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I goofed. Pink goes from 47.3 to 44.55. They moved the pink. That's why. So fairly close between the two. Also, Tuesday to Tuesday, Bacteroidetes goes from 45.8 to 48.9. So again, couple point difference, shifting, not crazy, especially with like something this big and broad. Actinobacteria, we go from 4.73 to 4.83 on the two Tuesday samples, so remarkably consistent. Vermicetobiota goes from 1.52 to 1.3 on the two Tuesday samples. And looking over here, Proteobacteria, on the two Tuesday samples, I'm in the 15th percentile and the 13th percentile respectively, which I think is excellent. And on Monday, for what it's worth, I was in the 17th percentile, which again is excellent. Like that is bottom part of the bell curve for Proteobacteria. I'm jumping for joy when I see that. So I think that is A, pretty consistent, and B, I think looks good for my part. But again, the clinical action would be basically the same. You wouldn't go treating the proteobacteria because they're low. You would look at my actinobacteria and think that they're great, which again is kind of surprising, given my history. Akkermansia vermiculobiota looks great across the 3 samples, so you wouldn't be treating that necessarily. And then Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes, both are pretty much in the green on all the samples, so you wouldn't really mess with them too much either. And then last one, I'll just show you, I'll toggle back and forth a little bit on this. Hold on. Yeah, the alignment's pooped on me again a little bit. That's all right. Just for the super nerds who want to see it. So here's the family level. So again, this one is the Monday sample. Then we go to Tuesday and Tuesday. And again, I'll toggle back and forth between the 2 Tuesday samples for a second so you can see the consistency. Tuesday, 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 Tuesday. So you can see the light blue and the dark blue shift around a little bit. So 15 versus 16 and 15 versus 17. Pink, 25 versus 23. Red, 18 versus 19. Orange, 6 and 6. Light blue, 5 and 5. Green, 5 and 5. Light orange, 3 and 3. Black, 7 and 7. So really, there's just a little tiny bit of variation between these 4. So again, pink is going up or down 2 percentage points, red's going up and down 1 percentage point, and the 2 blues are going up 1 and 2 percentage points respectively. I think that's pretty respectable overall. And then let me move my head bubble. And then just for those of you who, again, want to super nerd it out, so here is Tuesday sample number 1 and Tuesday sample number 2 for all of these data points. Tuesday and Tuesday. And let me get out of face bubble mode and we can bring this one home. So, all right, clinical corner with Dr. DiNezza here, and we'll talk about takeaways, what I'm going to be doing with this information. So I was pleasantly surprised. Again, I went into this initially, just wanting to know how it would stack up in a split sample test. But also I went into it figuring that there would be some inconsistency, and that's why I did the 3 samples to get my baseline for this new experiment that I'm doing. But there really wasn't as much variation as I thought there would be. Alpha diversity, yes. So I'm glad I did 3 samples for the sake of that, because that's one of the big things I'm looking at with my video coming up. But overall, a lot of the microbial markers were remarkably similar between the 3 tests. Even when we counted Monday versus Tuesday, a lot of the markers are fairly consistent between the 2 days, let alone the 2 split sample tests. The part of this test that I have the biggest issue with right now, or the biggest gripe with, is the functional markers. Again, it's not making sense to me why the microbiome looks virtually identical across the 3 samples, but the functional markers are varying so wildly. It also doesn't make sense to me where they say that I have propionate producers that are well within the normal range, and then they say I have no propionate production on the functional markers, or they labeled a GABA producer as high, and then they said that there's no GABA production on like the genetic level from the functional test. So, and if you guys remember too, this was my initial beef with this test, was that I had butyrate producers on my microbial portion of the test when I did this 2 years ago, but they said my butyrate production was basically 0, and that didn't make sense to me, and I did not get a satisfactory answer at the time. Again, my understanding right now is that it's because the number of leads, the number of reads with an R was different from sample to sample. But again, I wonder if we could report it as a percent of the total microbiome and kind of normalize it to that, rather than giving the absolute raw number. I think that that might make this information a lot more usable, and that could kind of calibrate it so that it's more consistent from test to test. So where I'm at personally is I'm going to use this test more. I was really happy and really impressed with the microbial markers themselves. So I'm going to use that part of the test, and I will be using it for diversity and richness as well. I probably won't pay a ton of attention to the functional markers. Instead of looking to see hydrogen sulfide down on the lower part of that test, I'm just going to see if they detected bilophila. Instead of looking for butyrate production, I'm just going to look and see, do you have butyrate producers that were within normal limits, and we would assume that they're making some butyrate for you. So that's kind of my comfort level and where I'm at with this test. I'm going to use it more clinically, but I'm probably not going to pay a ton of attention to the functional markers. I'm going to give the science a little bit of time to mature and develop and kind of figure itself out. And hopefully in the next couple of years, they can make that section of the test a little bit more consistent or usable. Again, I think it's neat. I hope that it comes around. I think it would be a really cool thing to see in microbiome testing. I just don't know if the technology is quite there yet. So personally, when I order this, I'm going to pay most attention to the microbial markers, and I'm not going to pay a ton of attention to the functional analysis part of the test. But I was very pleased. I was very pleasantly surprised. I excitedly immediately told Amy all about this because I was like shook in the best of ways. So I hope that this gives you something actionable and usable that you can use moving into the future. And just so you know, I do intend to do more split sampling because I think it's a perfectly valid way to assess our clinical tools. You know, again, it's not to say that I think that they have to be 100% identical. Never said that. But I want them to be reasonably consistent if taken from the same sample on the same day. So I'm going to continue to do split sampling, and I'm going to tell you about my findings, and I look forward to that. I already have the next one in the works for that matter, so stay tuned for that. If this next one is inconsistent, I'm going to have a conniption fit. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say what it is or why I'll have a conniption fit about this one in particular, but I hope for their sake this next one comes back very consistent between the two samples, because otherwise we're going to have a big problem on our hands here. So I'll just say that. But yeah, I think that this is important, and we need to know like what test is going to give us consistent results. Again, you can measure the same thing incorrectly twice and get consistent wrong results. So I'm not saying that this intrinsically means the test is accurate, but personally, I find it quite a bit more believable. And I do tend to think a test is more accurate if it's giving consistent results in a split sample. So that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I think I shaved it down from about an hour to about a half hour. So I know it's a long one, but believe me, it would have been longer if I used the other video. I will see you right back here on YouTube for more split sampling adventures. The experiment coming up in January that I'm super excited to bring to you about diversifying my microbiome, hopefully, fingers crossed. And I will see you either here or on the IBS Freedom podcast before you know it. Take care. Hey guys, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, click the like button, and leave a comment down below with the videos that you would like to see me do next. Doing all of those really helps support the channel and support my efforts in making as many videos as possible for you guys. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.